Welcome, Gabriel Dalporto, CEO of Udacity. Welcome to happy, succeeding, thriving, all that kind of good stuff in the future of work. So I'm so excited to speak with Gabe today because he runs a firm. Well, you know what? I'm going to give the ball to him. So Gabe, you can tell better than I. Can you share what you do and what your company is all about?
Sure, Gabe Dalporto. And first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation. We had a really great conversation the last time we talked, and just looking forward to the discussion. So I'm Gabe Dalporto. I'm the CEO of Udacity, and Udacity's mission is to train and upskill the world's workforce on the careers of the future. And if you think about the crazy transformation that's happening today, the half-life of a skill is about 5 years, which means everything you learned in college is probably obsolete at this point. And everything you know today is going to be obsolete in 5 years. And really our mission is to help people on that journey to move from maybe traditional skill sets into digital skill sets, and to really capitalize on the future and take advantage of the opportunities, because there's hundreds of millions of new jobs in these digital technologies being created, and also insulate yourself from disruption. So really excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
So for the people watching, Gabe, I know it's across the board, but are you noticing any particular areas where people should, beef up? Where should they upskill, retrain to be needed in this kind of market, especially now where, let's say in the tech sector, there's a lot of downsizing, hiring freezes, rescinding offers. So for people to make sure they're relevant and they can't be replaced, what would you suggest? Some ideas?
Yeah, kind of several ideas there. First, the macro trend we're seeing is that hundreds of millions of jobs are being destroyed in kind of, call it the careers of the past. Anything that can be automated is and will be automated. And even some pretty, complicated things that you think don't lend themselves to automation. Technology and AI is really moving forward very quickly. And so a lot of jobs are going to just, honestly be replaced. And so what workers need to think about is where is the world going, not where has it been, and forget the jobs of the past and really focus on the jobs of the future. And, generally the areas we see a ton of demand in is, number one, anything related to data and analytics. Everything from basic like business analytics, marketing analytics, data analytics, all the way up to data science. And then all the way up from data science to more niche things like machine learning, artificial intelligence. All these areas are seeing an explosion. And we're really swimming in more data than we ever have in the history of the world by a long shot. But there's not many people available to analyze that data and extract really powerful insights. And every organization we talk to is having struggles here. So data and analytics and data science is one. Another is areas like cybersecurity. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is really major data breaches in really major companies, and everybody's realized this isn't a side project anymore. And everybody in the organization needs to be fluent, just understanding what like cybersecurity and what some of the most common ways you can be attacked are. But then how do we develop an organization that has the skills to really insulate ourselves from a technological structural perspective from a lot of really creative cyber attacks? The criminals are getting more and more creative in how they approach organizations. So cybersecurity is an area. Cloud is another kind of generational shift from on-premises, servers, racks, stuff like that, into everything becoming virtual and cloud-based. And not just like where you store your data, where you process or do web servers, but where you do all your work, online. Think about like your old downloadable Microsoft Word now going to like a Google Doc and things like that. So everything is moving to the cloud. So those are three kind of like real macro areas that we're seeing a lot of interest, in addition to like all the standard stuff around programming and digital marketing and stuff like that. But like those three areas are huge growth areas.
Now, do you need to be tech savvy or mathematically inclined for those, or can you learn and pivot into these spaces?
Sure, and it's going to depend a little bit, right? So every one of these areas have, call it entry points, right? Where there aren't any prerequisites. It just requires someone with like a good mind, a lot of curiosity and some tenacity. And, through all of our, experience working with learners and really taking people from zero to proficient in a skill, what we find is like, if you've got a good head on your shoulders, and more important than anything, you just put the hard work in, you can succeed. So there's entry level in data science and analytics. There's entry level in cybersecurity. There's an insatiable demand in cybersecurity right now. There's entry level in cloud that doesn't require someone to have even a college degree, but just has good solid logical thinking. And for sure, programming is the classical, like, you don't, like, a lot of the best programmers actually never went to college.
So in a way that's good. So it's like you don't have to be intimidated,
That's right.
because I think a lot of people, myself included, you hear data science and just the name of it, it's like, oh, what is this? How am I going to do this? I don't know. This sounds like, what do I have to, we're going to a laboratory and make experiments? What's up? So you feel, if you have, the motivation, the drive, the will, you want to make this happen, and you're reasonably intelligent and you're willing to roll up your sleeves, then it's achievable. Then you can kind of pivot and go to these fast moving careers of the future.
Definitely. And some of them get more technical than others.
Yeah.
So if you want to like build machine learning models, you're probably going to have some prerequisite math, but to do basic data analytics, is a lot lower bar. But something like cybersecurity, something like cloud, most people can enter those and establish yourselves in an entry-level position, and then through experience work your way up and take additional programs to accelerate that path. But for the most part, these are very achievable, and most people can be intimidated by them, but the reality is they're so doable. Like we have, I'll give you one anecdotal example of 0 to 1. We worked with a student named Tony Boswell. And Tony was a truck driver, and he had his own truck, and he'd been driving his own truck for years. He spent like 300 days a year on the road, never got to see his wife, never got to see his kids. His truck broke down and he just didn't have the money to fix it. He almost went bankrupt. And he got actually a Udacity scholarship in Android app development. And he did so well on that. He got another scholarship and now is a software developer. He sold his truck. He gets to spend time with his family. He's making good wages and transformed his life. And so that's a good example of 0 to 1. An example of kind of like, 2 to 3 would be, we work with one of the top 5 oil and gas producers in the world. And they had a central data science group that was responsible for 70 countries, and they just couldn't do it. Like, you didn't have enough people in this group to service 70 countries. And so we created a custom program with them to create a citizen data scientist path where you could take people who understand good math. So like a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, geological engineer, teach them the basics of data science, teach them the basics of machine learning, and set them loose out in the field. And the great news is those people, because they have such local expertise, like they know what's important in this country versus that country, this context versus that context, they were able to deploy those new skills and have really transformational impact on the company in a very short period of time, because they took the time to do the upskilling, but then they also had the local context where they could deploy it. So it's depending on where you are, you may go from 0 to 1, or you may go from like 2 to 3, or you may go from 5 to 7. But it's finding your right entry point.
All right, don't laugh at me because I'm not in your business line, but hearing you talk, I wonder, as a society, would we be better off sometimes, instead of having your kids go to college, spending upwards of $70,000 a year, graduating with a degree, and you become, working at Starbucks, which nothing's wrong with that, but it's just now you're loaded down with debt, as opposed to maybe you put together, let's say Udacity, saying, hey, maybe you want to go into cybersecurity. We could put together a program which could help you get a foot in the door for kind of a fraction of the price. Or the truck driver you mentioned, we look out at, like, there's a whole class of people out here in America that got to get ignored. And maybe if somehow it reached out to these folks who have the aptitude, we talk about 11.4 million jobs are open. There's a lot of open jobs to say, hey, maybe we're not tapping into the right sources. Do you think, let's say with your company and just in general, that maybe that's going to happen? We're going to change the way we view the traditional university, the traditional 4-year degree, and maybe look for people who are underserved and overlooked to kind of bring them in a cost-effective way.
There are so many answers to that question.
Yeah.
At a high level,
yeah,
the universities are failing our students.
Yeah.
They are failing the United States. The rate of tuition increase since the 80s has been astronomical. The only industry that has raised prices faster than education is healthcare. And healthcare is a disaster in this country in terms of cost. And so is education. Healthcare and education wind up being massive, massive hidden taxes on the middle class. And the reason is universities have forgotten their mission, which is to actually, train people in the world. And they've become luxury brands. There's a great NYU professor that talks about this, that they get status.
Scott Galloway, right?
Yeah, Scott Galloway, by
yeah.
denying more and more students admission. The more rejections you give, the higher your ranking in US News and World Report. And
it's absurd. Right? It's crazy.
The more you charge, right, the more status you have. It is insane. They are completely and utterly failing our students. And when students graduate, they have tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands. Debt. And what do you do with that? You wind up with a degree that has no practical skills in today's economy. So I think that there's fundamentally the universities need to restructure themselves radically to fix the education they're giving. But at the same time, a lot of people, and if you think about like underrepresented minorities, like who maybe don't have the economic wherewithal to go to a 4-year program that's charging these unbelievable amounts of money, and even with scholarships are going to wind up burdened like they've never imagined, like you're just shutting down doors on everybody. So I think that there are really great paths that could go through the university system, but not just through the university system, in parallel or around the university system, where people can get real skills, get real jobs, paying oftentimes 6 figures, and get on with their lives. It's like, I'm the beneficiary of a university degree, but like I'm not using that university degree today. And I had a good time, and I went to some parties and learned some stuff, but like at the end of the day, it's a really tough spot that high school seniors are facing today. So I think there's just a different way to think about this.
There's another element that I noticed. On my wife's side of the family, we have about 20 nieces and nephews. The vast majority of them don't want to have kids. And it's not because they're like, the world's coming to an end, I don't want to have kids. It's they realize we can't afford to have kids because both of us are working. We're paying off our student debt. Rental, to rent an apartment, buy a home is so exorbitant, getting a car and so forth. So they feel like, how do we do this? And that's heartbreaking, because it seems like this would be one of the first generations in our history that they're not going to do as well or better than their parents. And the tuition, to your point, the tuition debt is just weighing them down like an anchor.
It is so true. So if you start to move into the solution space, right? Like, what do you do about that? One answer is you find alternative routes that don't require you going into a couple $100,000 of debt, which would be like learn a real skill. And there's a big role for enterprises to play in this. There's a big role for foundations to play in this. With enterprises, the challenge they have is something like 59%. We actually just did a survey with a major multinational survey with Ipsos, and we found that 59% of large enterprises have major and substantial skills gaps. And most of them say that a lack of skills are preventing them from achieving their business goals, right? So most enterprises around the world can't achieve their business goals because they don't have talent. Now, traditionally what happened was they go, okay, let me just go hire some people. But the problem is you can't even do that. There's not enough people with these skills in the world to fill all the open roles. And so they're just hitting a brick wall on the hiring front. And at the same time, they're experiencing really high attrition, and they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And the solution is right there. You need to invest in the talent that you have, right? Take the workforce you have and invest in them and transform them into the workforce you need through upskilling in a very structured way. Or you need to invest in what we call train to hire programs, where enterprises are saying no, no, no all the time to applicants because they don't have the skills, but their skills gaps might not be that far. You can actually say yes, and then put them through a structured training program that gets them the rest of the way and gets them into your employee base. So enterprises play a really important, and companies play a really important role in this ecosystem and kind of refactoring the US workforce. And foundations do as well.
It makes so much sense because from my experience, being executive recruiter, what I find is this: oftentimes you're right. They'll say no, no, no because they want 10 ingredients. You only have like 4 of them. But instead of saying, wait, let's figure out what skills does Gabe or Jack have, or Christine, and let's see if maybe we could, teach them those skills, upskill them, give them training, give them coursework, and then boom, we have it. Because right now, we have so many jobs open. People, companies complain we can't find enough talent, but yet they're still doing the old school way of like, okay, here's the job description, here's the resume. If everything matches, okay. If everything doesn't match up, sorry, we'll move on, which is ludicrous, where you can offer that training and upskilling and education and e-learning, and all of a sudden you can get it. And plus, think about it. There's such, 4 million people quit on like a nearly monthly basis. And a lot of them feel they're just not appreciated or they can't grow. So if you're worried about attrition, to your point, Gabe, then just train them and teach them. And they know that they can rise within the organization and they'll stay and they'll be happy because they're like, oh man, they just paid for me to learn this cybersecurity. This is great. I'm going to hang on here because like, who knows what they're going to teach me next? This is awesome.
So let me build on that for 1 second, because you mentioned employee attrition. One of the common concerns I hear from employers is, well, if I train someone in cybersecurity or data analytics, they're just going to take that and go get a job somewhere else, right? So that's the fear. The reality, and we've actually empirically measured this, is you have a massive retention benefit from training people. And the reason is a majority of workers under the age of 50, a majority of those workers say, I expect my employer to upskill and train me and to keep me current. And if I don't get that, I will go get that somewhere else. And so they're actually leaving because they're not getting the investments they need. And here's another statistic for you that's going to really highlight this. 80% of employers say they're doing a good job training their employees. Only 45% of employees agree with them.
Yeah, I hear stuff like that. Well, you shouldn't laugh because it's serious, but so often you see those studies where management saying, yes, 100%, we're doing great. And the employees and workers like, no, it's terrible. It's awful. And there's such a dichotomy between the two. It's amazing.
This was a huge study across many countries. And the employers are patting themselves. The employers are going, no. And so it's a really startling statistic. But when you do that, when you do invest in them, they're super appreciative. And particularly when you invest in them and not just say, hey, here's a benefit, knock yourself out, but you say, okay, I see you want to learn this skill. Let's get you that skill and then give you an opportunity to use that skill. that's when you see the real stickiness, the happiness, the loyalty. If I learn data analytics, but I get sent back to like being a call center rep, like I'm really unhappy. If I learn data analytics and I get a promotion into an entry-level data analytics position, I'm a loyal employee. And that's what the data shows. So, so there's a enormous churn right now happening across industries and categories. And one of the simplest, fastest things you can do is just to simply invest in your employees, upskilling and reskilling, and then let them use those skills in your company. And by the way, then you get massive ROI because they're taking those skills and transforming your business for you, as opposed to being a drain on your business.
Now, I don't know if you have these statistics, but I wonder too, if let's say, Christine gets upskilled, is now, on the path to become a cybersecurity expert. I'd imagine everybody who she works with is going to turn to her and say, how'd you do that? I want to do that too. So I would imagine it has this effect where everyone else is like, wait a minute, raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be part of it too. So not only do you keep Christine happy because she's on that path to greatness and moving forward, but now all her cohorts are going to say, hey, I want in too, and they're going to stay. And then I do know, from studies, but anecdotally, I see it all the time. If you have a tight knit group of people, who you're friends with and you have a network, you're apt to stay with the company longer because you're loyal to that group. So it has that effect, positive effect too, I believe, right?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things we're seeing with in the post-COVID world with a lot more remote work, I think we've learned that we can actually be really productive if we're remote. There's some things that become harder, but there's some pros and cons, gives and takes. But the one thing that is missing is those tight-knit social bonds and communities. And so anything you can do to create community, whether it's sending people together in a program together or doing something else together, I think can really help facilitate that. In terms of the cohort piece of this, though, what we've seen time and time again with our programs is that if you just say, hey, here's a learning program, anyone who wants to take it can take it, you typically get relatively low pickup, people using it, and relatively low graduation success rates. When you say, hey, here's a program, and I want to train 100 people on these skills because I got 100 open job openings, and I'm going to take everybody through in a cohort together, in a kind of a community type cohort. That act of taking people together through a program in a structured way with guidance and administration results in vastly higher success and graduation rates, like order of magnitude. So if you're really smart and deliberate about your programs, if you put people together in these community groups, if you support it through like community managers and actually synchronous sessions and things like that, you have like live human interventions when necessary, like that results in a really good outcome. And it really leverages that community aspect.
How does that work with Udacity? Are there a chance for people to network with each other and be part of this group?
Yeah, so there's community aspects on our platform, and what we do is we provide for the employer, provide the analytics so they can see each individual, how they're progressing. If people are off track, then either we or the employer can then step in and get them back on track, or the manager. We can do synchronous, what we call connect sessions, like either weekly or bi-weekly, where we do just a live session to check in on people, give them an opportunity to feel connected to the group. So there's a lot of really interesting tactics you can deploy that ultimately create that feeling of community.
And just the logistics of it. So let's say, I sign up. How long does it take, or does it depend on whatever program?
It's going to depend on the program. And if you think of, we have called a unit of learning called a Nanodegree, and think of this as like a mini version of a master's degree. And it's really focused around a job spec. So if I want to be a digital marketing person, well, then what are the bullet points of my jobs spec that I need to know? Well, I need to know paid search, I need to know organic search, I need to know copywriting and some and test and learn and stuff like that, right? And so each of those 4 bullet points, we structure a program to get you hands-on practice in each of them. So like, how do we get you to set up a paid search campaign? How do we, give you an assignment to write some ad copy creative? How do we give you an assignment to do something else? So you get this like real practical experience in the process. Something like a Nanodegree will take part-time, so 10 to 15 hours a week. Will take, call it 3 to 4 months. If you can go a little slower, so maybe it's 5 months, or if you want to just go heads down, maybe you can do it in 2 months, right? So part of it is how much time you have to dedicate. But think of it as, 3 to 4 to 5 months, and you get like a full job spec skill, and you're ready to do that job day one, and you sit down in your seat and you're doing your job. If you want a micro skill, so say you only wanted to know, paid search, and that's less than a month, let's say, that's a much shorter period of time investment. So it's really just how much do you want to go and how far do you want to go and how much time do you want to invest?
Have you tried to partner with companies that say, okay, here's kind of the job spec, the type of person we need. Can you make a nano, coursework module to fit? Does that happen?
That all the time. And so, most of our clients will have that situation. They'll say, look, I don't want to go from A to C. I want to go from B to D. Mm-hmm. And we do that all the time with them. So we can customize our programs to understand and we can actually assess your employees to say, okay, where are they in that spectrum, right? Okay, so they're here. Now let's have a custom program that takes you from this baseline to where you need them to go for your specific context. That's great because it avoids wasting time on stuff they already know, wasting time on things they don't need to know. And then when they complete the program, they have the skills they need to do the thing you need them to do. So they get to actually deploy those skills real time. So that's really a best practice for us, is that level of customization.
But why wouldn't, this might sound naive and stupid, but like, why wouldn't more companies do that? Because it seems in the long run be much more cost effective to say, hey, let's get Gabe and his team to teach people how to be data analysts because we need them. Or maybe we need people who could do just kind of entry level coding work or whatever the case may be, rather than having to hire a recruiter like myself and pay a big fee to get the person in, and maybe they stay, maybe they don't stay. Or maybe people leave because they feel they're not being, appreciated and not being trained. So from a cost factor, I imagine it's a huge savings.
It is way cheaper than hiring, right? Think about like how much it costs you to, run your internal sourcing people, pay a recruiter, go through all those candidates, all that interviewing time. Like think about the true cost of hiring. It's not just the recruiter cost, it's all this other time and human capital costs. And then you hire someone and it's like almost flip a coin, do they work out or not, right? Or you can take someone internally who is a good performer, who you like know is a cultural fit, they know your business, and you invest in their skills, which can be done really quickly and efficiently, and you get them on their way and they stay longer, right? So it's a much less expensive model. Now, why don't they do that? I think we're just moving into a new paradigm. Like historically, skills weren't so technical, right? So you could just hire out in the open market, and there were a lot of people, who could kind of fit in and fill those roles. Right now, I just talked to the chief security officer for a major US bank, and she told me, quote, "We're in an all-out war for cybersecurity talent and we're losing. Mm-hmm. And we just can't hire it anymore. So we have no choice but to manufacture it in-house." And then they're trying to figure out, oh, how do we do that in-house? We don't have the expertise. And that's where someone like Udacity comes in, because we kind of plug into that. But I don't think I just think it's not been how companies have operated, and they're being forced into that mode of operation right now, and they're trying to figure it out. So there's a lot of just like desire at this point, and we're seeing kind of a lot of increasing demand for services like Udacity, but they're trying to figure it out, and they need to really partner with a great company who's been there, done that, knows like what works, knows what doesn't work, and can help them accelerate that process.
I can imagine how this could play out. So let's say take the cybersecurity. And it's interesting. I had on the podcast this guy, Jesper, he's in Denmark. And he was kind of telling how even before Russia invaded Ukraine, they were just, they were just causing havoc in terms of cybersecurity matters, in Finland and Denmark and all these countries. And it's just horrible. And the same thing, they don't have enough people to fight back. And, the business losses were tremendous. So could you foresee, let's say Udacity or what have you, one day saying, hey, okay, we need to have, I have no idea, but I'll make them know. We need 50,000 cybersecurity experts. And on your platform or some platform, you have a platform, you hire the best in the business, right? The best cybersecurity experts ever. And you could teach people, like have this nano course within 3, 4, 5 months, where now all of a sudden you have a whole large number of people who are well-trained who could come in there and help out. I mean, is that too naive, or is that kind of scalable?
We're kind of experimenting with that right now. And so we've worked with.
Oh, so it's a smart question then. All right, good.
So, we're working right now with like some of the largest professional services consulting firms in the world. We're working with some very large enterprises with the goal of running scholarship programs in areas that they really care about, and ideally scholarship programs that have really good representation of minority participants as well. And then that becomes a bespoke recruiting pool for this program. So an employer may say, great, I want to sponsor 500 scholarships in cybersecurity with the goal of hiring 30 to 40 of them, right? And then we can actually go find a diverse pool of candidates and run those programs, and then they can hire them. Or they can take their inbound application traffic and put them through those scholarship programs and then hire the graduates, right? So this is happening. Enterprises are very, very excited about this. And so we've got some programs running, and so that is not a far-fetched future, right?
See, that's great. Actually, that's exciting, right? If that would take place, how awesome would that be? That'd be amazing.
Well, and then in a way, you're kind of facilitating that end run around the university system, right? So if employers are willing to sponsor, as opposed to, imagine a world where instead of spending $250,000 over 4 years at one of these luxury universities, an employer paid me to learn cybersecurity and then made a job offer, right? That's a pretty good alternative. So we're starting
especially for a parent who has to pay that money. So it's a great, I like that very much. It's too late for me. My kids are already almost finished. So it's a little too late, but for others, it'll help out.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little anecdote too. Like, I'm kind of a weird person by background. I'm a nuclear engineer by training. But I spent most of my career as a chief marketing officer. So right, go figure. Then I became a chief financial officer, right? And so I've done everything from being an engineer to being a marketer to being a finance person. And then I decided I want to learn how to code, because I don't know how to code. And when I talk to a CTO, I don't know what they're talking about. So then I actually took a coding course and learned like front end, back end, JavaScript, React, MongoDB, and things like this. So I could really understand how the software world, fits together, right? And so now, like, if you think about my skill sets,
you got a great skill stack,
engineering to software development to marketing to finance or whatever. But in a way, that's kind of the future of work. It's people with a broad group of skills that aren't hemmed in by I took this degree and that's what I have to do the rest of my life. None of this is rocket science. Like I went from being a nuclear engineer to a marketer because I just put my head down and learned marketing. And I went into finance, not because I was qualified to be a CFO, but because I said, okay, well, what does the CFO do? Well, let me learn that really quick. And then off I went. So I think that's like in a way, like what the future work looks like.
That's terrific. I want to be sensitive about this, but for the people who, let's say, are in the tech space, because it seems they've been hit hard more so than other sectors recently in terms of downsizing, layoffs, rescinding offers.
Yeah.
Would you suggest for them to say, hey, just like you built this skill stack of different experiences, that maybe they should take a look and say, hey, maybe I was fill in the blank, whatever it is, but maybe use this time to kind of learn some other skills just in case. Now, maybe you might love it and say, hey, this is really what I want to do. Or maybe it's just good to have now. So you have an extra, knowledge in a certain space. Do you think for those people who are actively maybe looking for a job now, maybe incorporate this into their job search? Hey, I'm looking for a job at the same time. Let me see what other things I should learn in the interim just to play it safe and to make sure I have some other skills moving forward.
Well, I would extend it beyond just people applying to tech companies, right? The benefit that people like Google and Facebook and Netflix have had, and Apple, is they're like very well-known, exciting brands. Mm-hmm. They can pay infinite amounts of money to hire a developer or data scientist, and they just like were paying crazy money for entry-level people. If you're Home Depot or you're Citibank or you're something else, like a normal company, you don't have the same cachet and you don't have the same budget flexibility to go just like blank check, bring in the talent you want. And so those companies didn't, the Googles and the Facebooks, like they didn't have a problem recruiting tech talent. It was everybody else in the world who had a problem recruiting tech talent. And so I would say there's a lot of demand in all of those other companies still, absolutely. And it's pretty clear. It's those things we talked about in the beginning. It's like cybersecurity, it's cloud, it's data, it's analytics, it's data science. It's all those areas where there's just outsized demand that, if you invest in yourself, like it's going to give you a really great opportunity to find a role. And kind of circling back to almost the original question, which is, is there a route around college? What we're seeing is a macro trend from hiring to degree to hiring to skills. And there's been a lot of conversation at the government level. There's a lot of conversation at the leader of enterprise level about like proactively shifting hiring requirements away from that degree into that skill. And once you get into that world, and this is a macro trend that is happening, once you get into that world, everything opens up for everybody. Even Microsoft is really leaning into this right now, right? And they're famous for being degree snobs. Yeah. So I think like we are in this world where things are changing really quickly. And if you find something that you're excited about, that you could see yourself doing, like lean in, right? There's huge numbers of job opportunities out there in these areas.
It's interesting because I wrote just recently about LinkedIn, which is owned by Microsoft, that made a big initiative exactly that, skills-based hiring. That's kind of really a big movement for all the reasons you just articulated. So let me ask you for the just for the folks here. And then what we do is, we edit it, clean up the podcast, then we repost it on social media. For people who want to find you and find Udacity, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, so at Udacity, we call it 3 primary constituents. We serve enterprises, so think about big companies who are looking to reskill their workforces or looking to hire people outside their normal hiring criteria and get them trained. So that's one. We work on the scholarship front, so with large governments who want to transform their workforces, or even regional governments. So that's like kind of societal level scholarship programs. And then the third is with individuals. right? So if you are just an individual who is looking to invest in yourself, we work with individuals as well. So the best place to find us is go to udacity.com and really select into who are you? Like, am I an enterprise? Am I a government? Or am I an individual? And then we have really good solutions for each of those constituents.
Awesome. Well, that's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming here, spending the time. This is great because I'm with you. I really think this is one of the best ways for people to kind of navigate their career, to learn, not having to spend a whole lot of money, pivot into something new, reinvent themselves. So this is great. So I'm glad you're able to walk it through. This is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
Excellent.
I enjoyed the conversation and look forward to talking again soon.
Excellent. Thanks, Gabe.